This is a video for how to correctly dimension number 7 out of multi-view drawing 2.4. So if I'm going to get out of this real quick, you'll notice that I'm in courses, activity 2.4. If you want to see an object larger, you can just drag your magnifying glass on top of that object and click. And we'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. Now, as we get into dimensioning, there's two different types of dimensions, size and location. You will notice that I can look at this object and see its full dimensions as far as width, depth, and height. So I know it's 1.75 by 1.25 by 0.75. Those are your size dimensions. Your location dimensions are where your features are. So for instance, this object that kind of looks like a bread box, I can tell that it starts a ½ inch in from both sides, and then this is the width of this is just 0.75. So we're going to look at two different types of dimensions in here. We're going to look at baseline dimension, and we're going to look at some chain dimensioning aspects. Now, the thing about dimensioning is your features are aspects of the part. So your size dimensions are more your size thing. Like the feature would be, that bread box shape with that window cut in it. That's kind of how you would describe this object if you were to use words. So we're going to talk about how to go about dimensioning some of these objects together. So I've gone ahead and drawn the multi-view. I think you did that. You've done this before so far. Now we're looking at dimensioning. I'm going to use a colored pencil as we go through here, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more so we can take a look at this. And let's go ahead and start dimensioning a little bit. So I know that it's 1.75 total from side to side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw for myself an extension line up from here and over. I can pick up my pencil a little bit to try to make this a little bit cleaner. And I'm going to put in 1.75 inches. So that's going to be our full width dimension. We're going to place that in. Now, in looking at our drawing, we can look and notice that it's 0.5 inches from the side. And it's the same thing on the opposite side. So we're going to go from left to right, and I'm going to place a 0.5 inch dimension from here over to here. And I'm going to say, I'll come up a little bit higher. Let's come up a little bit higher here. And I'm going to say 0.5. So, next. We know that from here to here was 0.75, so I'm going to come all the way up to here, trying to give myself a little bit of room for the features, and I'm going to place 0.75 inches. So now, as we take a look at this, you're going to notice that I don't necessarily have to place this dimension over here on the side, because I can infer that, because 0.5 plus 0.75 is 1.25. So I know that I don't have to place this dimension. That would be a redundant dimension. That would be a not needed dimension. Would be not needed. So I'm going to come over here. I want to erase this little line I put over here. Now you're going to notice that my dimensions look a little bit, close together, and that's fine for a drawing like this because I'm trying to give myself a little bit of space to dimension this little window in here, because this window is going to be a feature. Now in dimensioning, we want to try to keep our dimensions between the views. So you're going to notice that I didn't come down below the object or above, my top view up here at the top. I didn't come up here above this. I tried to stay between the views. I also don't want to dimension to hidden lines. So to dimension this little window right here, I can't come up to my top view and dimension to these hidden lines right here. I could have put my 0.5 and my 1.7 or my 0.75 on this right here and gone through it. I could have done that. That's your choice, but just try to keep your dimensions between the views. Now I'm going to go about trying to dimension this little window. So you'll notice that I'm really just dealing with just width dimensions right now. I'm just dealing with what I see from left to right when I look at the front view. The front view is the most descriptive view of the object. So as I take a look in here, you're going to notice that the front view of the object would be the one I would use to describe this object. So the top view doesn't really give you the full contour, neither does the side view. The front view does. So let's go back to our drawing here and let's take a look. I have 0.25 in from the left and 0.25 over. So we're going to go ahead and place those dimensions on the object. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up from here, a little extension line and over, and I'm going to say 0.25 and another extension line up and over, and I'm going to say 0.25 again. So I have those two dimensions placed. So we've done all of our width dimensions. I know how wide it is. I know the distance in from the side to here. I know the width of this thing, I'll call it a little bread box. And I know the width of my window right here. I totally know that width. Now let's deal with some height dimensions. So as we look through, we can go back to the object and we can say that our height dimensions are, 1.25 tall, and this is 0.25 up. we've got some location dimensions. So from the top down, we've got 0.25. And from the top of our bread box down, we've got 0.5 as well. So we can't put these 0.25 and 0.5 dimensions in our side view because we'd be going to a hidden line, and we're trying to avoid that. So what we're going to have to do is we're actually have to draw an extension line all the way out to here. Excuse me, I broke my pencil as I drew that. So we're going to have to draw our extension line all the way out to here. And we have another one to draw off of here to come out to here. And then we have another one that we're going to draw off of that object. You're going to notice that we crossed extension lines here. You're trying to avoid that whenever possible, but we're also trying to avoid dimensioning to a hidden line. If you look at the dimensioning rules in your course's curriculum, it'll tell you to avoid dimensioning to hidden lines. So let's go back to our drawing here, and you're going to see that it's 0.25 down and 0.5 tall. So we're going to go ahead and place those dimensions in our views. And we're going to say 0.25, and then it was 0.5 from here to here. 0.5. So there's that. I got 0.25 and 0.5. I have a little bit sharper of a pencil, so I can always go back and erase and redraw. Dimensioning is a skill that you develop over time. So developing dimension skills really gives you a good way to communicate. Remember, this is communicating numerical values of objects. And so the communication has to be clear, it has to be non-redundant, and has to be easy to understand. So now we have to do our height dimensions, and our full height dimension is 1.25, and we have this little ledge down here that is 0.25. We could put that on our front view, but I'm trying to avoid crossing so many extension lines and trying to not muddy this up as much as I possibly can. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to our side view. So our side view is 1.25 and 0.25 tall. So in my side view over here, I'm going to come over and down, and I'm going to come over and up here, and I'm going to say 1.25. And this little ledge down here is 0.25. So I'm just going to place that here. That is much, much easier to understand. Let me give myself a little bit better too there. It's a little small. So 0.25. Now I can totally look at this and say 1.75. Let me come over the top of that again so it's easier to read. 1.75 inches by 1.25 inches by 0.25. Remember, these are sketches. You can call this a final sketch or a final drawing if you wanted to. Before you go into Inventor, have your students get a chance to dimension some of these things in their notebook with pencil. It allows them to get the skill just a little bit better. So we still have to do depth dimensions. So we have every width dimension that we would need to make this part. We have our height dimension here and our height dimensions over here. So now we need to look at depth. The full depth of the object is 0.75, and then you also have the depth of this little bread box area at being 0.5. Now there's depth in two of your views, the side view over here and the top view up here on top. This is the most common mistake students make when doing multi-view drawings. You'll notice that I have 3 boxes deep on my notebook, or 3 grid spaces deep, and over here I have 3 grid spaces deep. It's very common for students to have 4 grid spaces deep over here and let's say 5 or 3 up here. These have to be the same distance, and we're trying to keep the dimensions between the views here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place my depth dimension in my top view because I'm trying to avoid crossing these extension lines wherever possible. If I drew a line from here all the way up, you would notice that that would cross that extension line there. So I'm going to come up here to my top view and I'm going to place my dimensions. So I'm going to place a dimension that comes out to here, and I'm going to call this 0.75. And then I'm going to drag this out to here, and I'm going to put a dimension here, and that's going to be 0.5. You'll notice I have my size dimension and I have my location dimension. I have 0.75 right here, and I have my 0.5. There's my location. I have my size dimension down here, 1.25. Height dimension, 0.25 down here. Now this is a very pretty easy way to go about dimensioning this object. The main thing that I have my students do after we get done dimensioning these is they have to hand off their drawing to somebody else, and somebody else has to draw it to the exact dimensions placed on the object, because ultimately that's the point of dimensioning, is communication, so it can be reproduced either in manufacturing or in a drawing. So the pencil will never go out of style. So I try to have my kids sketch as much as they possibly can in class, and the Inventor skills are more of a supplemental skill, and they go through and use that. So this has been the lesson for how to dimension number 7 out of activity 2.4, multi-view sketching.